Hey, everybody. Welcome to another brand new episode of Hey Man, It's Okay, a men's mental health podcast. I'm Sky.
And I'm Ryan Heapy, a psychotherapist out of Newport Beach, California. And of course, as always, everything said here is not in relation to my clinical practice, but just my own opinions, thoughts, feelings, etc. So today I am extra excited to have a guest that I've somewhat known, my former office colleague of at least a few years. I think both of us have bounced around in on the same floor in the same building. And I have referred a handful of patients, I believe, to her, who I know she has done incredible work with. I've gotten to listen to a lot of her content on both social media and more long form podcast. And she has always impressed me. This is Vanessa Morgan, an excellent couples therapist. She's been practicing for over a decade and kind of operates with a few different modalities. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about them and kind of your approach to couples therapy and therapy in general.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. So should I start there what I'm trained in?
Yeah, or just how do you look at couples therapy? How do you look at relationships? All that.
Yeah. So through many different lenses. And some days I feel like I know a lot because I've been studying this for over a decade. And some days I just feel kind of still, I'm brand new to it. And I have to think about, start all over. Okay, how do I want to conceptualize this? So never a dull day at the office, as I'm sure that you know.
Just to jump in real fast, I totally agree. And yeah, I was just listening to a podcast with Huberman and Lori Gottlieb, and it was like 3.5 hours. I think I'm only like an hour or two in. But also practicing for 10 years, every case, I'm often feeling like I'm starting from scratch a lot of times. And so in listening to other people talk about the way they do therapy, I'm always like, oh yeah, I used to do that. Oh, I used to think about it like that. So it's always kind of, we have all this knowledge, but there's only so much we can kind of pull from in each moment.
Yeah, and I think it's actually good to maintain humility as a therapist, right? I was talking about with my husband the other day when he was saying, like, if I sign a big contract at work, I know that I had a great day, right? But you don't maybe always know how you impact the people that are in your office and what the rest of their day looks like. And so it's one of those jobs that I don't want to say it's thankless because there are a lot of moments where I can see people healing and connecting and relating in new ways. But it is a job that I think requires a lot of humility because whenever you think you know for sure that, this is what I'm looking at, it's dangerous territory, I found as couples therapists anyway.
Yeah, I actually feel that way. So I've just kind of been doing couples therapy now, more integrating as a real part of my practice for the last few years. And with individuals, I definitely feel that I don't know a lot of times, how much I'm helping, the growth, but the dynamic is totally different when it comes to couples. And some of the best sessions I've had is, you get a couple who's on the verge of divorce and then 10, 15 sessions later, they come in sitting on opposite sides of the couch. We can't stand one another. And 10, 15 sessions later, they're coming in, holding hands, laughing. I don't know. It's almost a completely different type of practice, like a completely different type of work.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
learned early in my career, right when I was actually a trainee still, so I wasn't licensed or anything. I had my first couple. And I just remember feeling so in the weeds, like they're
Mhm.
yelling at each other. I don't know what to do. In individual therapy, you can just reflect back and be empathetic. In couples therapy, it's like a whole different animal. So that's why I actually trained for 4 extra years with Stan Tack and my mentor, because I just realized like, if I wanted to be good at this, I had to have extra training and I had to specialize kind of in one thing. So that's why I chose relationships. One, just because I find attachment and neurobiology and all the things that kind of help couples very interesting. And it's helped my own life
Yeah.
and it's helped me clinically. But also just because I think to be good as a therapist, you really do kind of need to specialize in particular areas, at least for me.
That's so
Yeah,
funny.
I
I
feel that.
literally just started reading Wired for Love. And I'm
Oh,
really excited to get through it. Yeah, that's great.
yeah. Yeah. Cool.
So, we really want to, if nothing else, at least help the men that are listening out there. And something I've been thinking a lot about is sort of the way social media has been affecting relationships in general, I see there's kind of I feel like there's a lot of negatives. There's a lot of men in a lot of ways seem like they're not wanting to sort of, or they're like withdrawing in a lot of ways, maybe from relationships, and also feeling like women are wanting more out of their relationships. And I think I've also kind of noticed that never before have I seen so many people wanting such different things out of their relationships. And so, like on a spectrum, everything from that I've heard, like the trad wife, who's like somebody who
Mhm.
just stays at home to take care of their man, to on the other side, maybe I don't know if it's all like on one linear spectrum, but a polyamorous, ethical non-monogamy, just very different things that people are looking for, which I think makes it difficult for couples to meet their needs. But I don't know, what are some of the things that you're really starting to see a lot that, whether it's from culture, society, social media, that's sort of affecting relationships, maybe different than it has in the past?
I mean, that's such a great question. It's such a broad question
Um,
because one
uh,
thing I've learned about relationships is there's really no right way to do relationships, right? I think like culturally or religious, people can moralize what a relationship should be. But over the years of working with relationships, I've just come to see them, whatever form they're taking, as vehicles for growth. If we approach them consciously, if we approach them intentionally, they can be great vehicles for transformation, self discovery, really, ways to learn about ourselves or give our lives meaning. So, that's where I'm hoping we're going with relationships, that people start to become more conscious with them and see them kind of as like a sacred practice, where I see them now as in a great point of transition, that there's a lot of debate about what relationships should be
yeah.
and what the roles in relationships should be and who should be doing what, and how socialization has kind of shaped how we view each other and how we value each other and how we navigate needs and emotions and labor in the house and outside of the home, right? So I think relationships are kind of going through a renaissance and people are deciding for themselves what they want them to be, right? That there's like more freedom than ever to kind of, it used to be that we had to pair up because, culturally we either needed it to survive or that was just the moral imperative. But now we have so much more freedom to really engage with other people how we want them, like how we want to. And most people, not
Mhm.
everybody, right? It's a privileged
Yeah.
position that I'm speaking from right now, right? A lot of people still are in a survival stance around relationships. But I see the kind of this emergence of an idea of people are able to have more freedom in relationships and kind of think about how they want to engage in them.
What do you mean that people are in a survival stance when they're often in a relationship?
Well, how I meant it in that moment was that, people are together as like an economic resource, right? They're
Mhm,
together
mhm,
to
gotcha.
survive or to make
Mhm,
kids. But there's a whole other way people can be stuck in
mhm.
survival in a relationship that we
Ah,
could dive into, relating to trauma and attachment and all sorts of stuff if we want to go that direction. But other themes I see is kind of like you talked about in social media. There can be these echo chambers, and you get really specialized content to kind of reinforce whatever it is you maybe already believe or are starting to believe or what you
mhm,
engage with. So I see a lot of women these days becoming concerned with domestic labor, like how the household chores are separated and if there's equality in that, kind of like the fair play
mhm,
method, that kind of thing. I hear a lot of talk about narcissism. Everyone's coming in saying, I
mhm.
think my spouse is a narcissist. No one's
Yes.
coming in,
Yeah.
by the way, saying, I think I might be a narcissist, or very few. I've had a
Yeah.
couple
Yeah.
people like worried about it. I want to start with
Mhm,
them and be like, listen, if you're that self reflective and you're worried about it, you're probably not, but let's look at it.
mhm,
So I see
mhm.
a lot of stuff around narcissism. I see a lot
Yeah.
of questions about attachment. I'm an avoidant or I'm a
Yeah.
anxious, right? And I think there's some
Mhm.
problematic conceptualization when
Wording.
people are trying
Yeah.
to like
Mhm,
fit themselves in tiny boxes. So I remind people all the time, like in psychology, we're just trying to inform treatment. And that's why we have the categories. But it's a very Western kind of specific way of thinking about things that may not be the most helpful or the most healing. So, I mean, I really like to take everything with a grain of salt instead of, oh, you are an avoidant, right? We think about
mhm,
like
mhm.
how you are relating impacts your relationship and how it impacts you. So I like to think very relationally when I do my work with clients.
What do you think about there's this, I don't know where I'm stealing this from, but I definitely stole it from somebody. like this therapy culture kind of that we as our field, clinicians, psychologists, are almost actually shaping. So, whether that's like the buzzwords, narcissism, attachment, I almost feel every year there's a new emergence or like a renaissance of some, one year it was like shadow work. The next year I felt like it was EFT. I feel like the last 6 months I've been hearing from all sorts of people about IFS, internal family systems, and all our different parts. I'm sure Gottmans are going to make a comeback any day or something like that. But I feel like I get clients who, like you said, and something's kind of interesting, but like these algorithms are so good at validating how you're feeling, almost better than maybe any therapist can be, because you'll get this meme that like perfectly encapsulates the way you feel and also maybe the way you feel about your partner and how your partner should be showing up. And so I felt sort of like this responsibility that, we should be doing something but like better informing people on kind of the bigger picture of some of these concepts. And this is one of the things that I really appreciate about you is the content that I've seen you put out kind of tries to add to the context of a lot of these, 30-second reels that like your partner's a narcissist because he's thinking about himself every once in a while. And it almost, in a lot of ways, it's really framing people as the other a lot. And I feel like it's created more of an individualistic position for a lot of people. At least that's what I'm feeling like I'm trying to sort of shift them from a lot of times, both partners, is how they can kind of think more about their partner.
Yeah, I think that especially when we're in our fight flight states of mind or in our nervous system, it's kind of impossible to be using the parts of our brain that are relational. So what Stan would call like the ambassadors, right? Our prefrontal cortex, parts of our brain that can problem solve and be relational and hold complexity of, oh, what's my need? What's your need? Or this is your perspective or my perspective. So what we would know in psychology is like healthy individuation. Those parts of, our brain are not available to us when we're fighting and in fight flight. And so a lot of couples work really is about teaching people how to regulate their nervous systems, how to be relational, and how to shift from a very simplistic, shoot first, ask questions later kind of fight flight response to a, whoa, I'm really triggered right now. I'm not in a state to be thinking about the complexity of your need and my need and where they intersect. How do I mindfully kind of slow this down and become more relational? So that's essentially kind of what I teach clients day to day, is to even really recognize when they're triggered, because people get so lost in their stories, and it's
Yeah.
so easy to see kind of the projections of some of disowned parts of yourself in other people, or the parts that you hate about yourself, or things that you feel shame about. You kind of unconsciously can enact that with your partner. And it's really hard to catch it between the two of you. That's why I do think couples therapy is so important. I think everyone should go to couples therapy, honestly,
Yeah,
because
seriously.
you learn the skills that you need to be relational, because we just are not receiving them culturally. Like most people don't have the skill sets that they need to really thrive in relationship. We've just moved away from it for what a host of reasons, I guess. I couldn't even begin to name all of the reasons why we maybe have lost touch with how to relate to each other really meaningfully. But I think we're coming to kind of a crisis point where people are realizing that like we need each other, and we need to figure out how to work together, both on a very like individual and couples way, and then in a collective way. So, I mean, that's my hope anyways. That's what I tell myself as a couples therapist every day, that people are more and more motivated to do this work all the time. Whether that's actually true or not, I don't know. But I feel that in my personal life is that the older I get, the more I just really cherish the people that I have strong bonds with, and the people that I feel like I really know them and they know me, and we can have beef one day, but we can really like work it out because there's that strong, secure foundation, because we know we both, more than anything else, more than being right, we care about the welfare of the other person. Like, I think that's so deeply what people are longing for.
Yeah. No.
But then they know it's not.
Yeah. One of the things I say a lot is that we, especially once we get into our fight or flight, we start hiring our defense team or our defense attorneys. And next thing you know, we've got Johnny Cochran and the Kardashian, they're all up there making the world's best case, of how that person has wronged us and how we're in the right. And it's so hard to kind of get out of those stories, that we create. And a lot of these are stories that we've created, long before we met our partner. And, we're, usually ingrained in us through childhood. So for the guys out there, what are some things that, you might suggest or advise that you've heard from people lately that, maybe in how things to think about when entering into a relationship, things to maybe start thinking about again while in a relationship? Yeah. What are some tips, suggestions? How do we help meet others' needs a little better while maybe getting some of our needs met at the same time?
Yeah. I mean, as a female, I find it hard to know truly what it's like to be a male, right? What's an experience of men, and I'm sure it's different for every man to some degree. But I have been noticing men getting this messaging around: you have to make money, you have to be 6'4", 6'5"
Mm,
now,
yes.
even an inch
The
taller.
666 rule. Uh-huh. With a six pack, I think. Yeah.
Right? There's just so much demand, and it's largely based on things that I don't actually think will make people or couples happy over time. And so many things
Yeah.
that are actually outside of our control. I heard some stat the other day, I can't even quote it appropriately, but like a lot of people who have money is generational wealth. It's not because people went out and figured out how to make money. Right. And so it's like men and women, I think, are held to these like impossible standards, at least superficially. And so what I would encourage men to do is, like, don't buy into that. Don't buy into this idea that you have to be so tall or so fit or so rich to be worthy of a really meaningful relationship. The best thing I think that you can do for yourself as a human and also as a partner is to develop emotional intelligence, to really understand what feeling are you feeling in this moment? What feeling is that your partner or that person that you want to relate to feeling in that moment? Really developing what's called attunement. So your ability to use your nervous system to accurately read somebody else's nervous system while also being able to make meaning of your own experience. So I see a lot of men with what's called alexithymia, which is the inability to put feelings to words. So men often will come in and they'll say, "Oh, no, no, it's annoying." Right. And really, when we dig it down a little deeper to their experience, or we slow things down, what they felt was shame, or they felt dismissed, or they felt something more vulnerable, but they've been socialized to think that they
Mm,
can't actually bring their authentic experience to their partner. Right. So they're really minimizing kind of their experience, not giving a lot of voice to, like, "Hey, I didn't like it when you said that to me that way. I want to hear your emotional response, but I don't want to hear it that way." Right. So being able to really advocate for themselves and their experience, I think there's a bit of a shortage of that, of men like knowing how to do that relationally. So I see men who will kind of avoid things a lot. "Ah, it's fine," avoid, minimize, distance. That's a lot of defense strategy I see more commonly among men. Women are more often, not always, right? It's really hard to say anything that's true about one particular demographic, but
sure.
it just,
Yeah.
I do see these themes, that women want to talk about the things and men kind of want to minimize and think that everything's okay.
Mm,
And so I think a lot of women are really hungry for a man who's, "Hey, I can work on my stuff. I know what my stuff is. I want to grow. If I'm doing something that doesn't feel good to you, I want to hear about it. If I don't feel good about something, I want to be able to share that with you." Like I think that is the currency of dating for men, not height, not wealth, not looks, but emotional intelligence. I think will get you farther than anything else.
My wife and I always have a feelings wheel within reach, whether that's on our phone, we have them hanging up in our house, we have a feelings list in our bathroom, because both of us were trying to figure out how to name our feelings more than just like mad, sad, angry. No, this is like betrayal. Is it jealousy? Is it greed? Is it, getting to that deeper level has helped us to communicate better. I think that's so important and such a good tip for couples is to keep something like that around.
Yeah, yeah, to really understand the nuance of feelings, not just,
Right.
five major ones, but the
Right.
or deeper kind of exploration of what couples might be feeling. Yeah, just
Well, and actually, yeah,
that's it.
the better, I saw some research recently, like the better that we get at being able to articulate our feelings, the better we are at kind of being able to know ourselves, but also understand what we're going through and then understand what we should be doing, as, I believe emotions communicate, some sort of motivation to do something, right? If we're feeling isolated, disappointed, angry, and I think especially what you're talking about, like a lot of guys go straight to anger, right? Like maybe, that is their go-to for disappointment, sadness. 40
Anxiety.
other probably, yes, anxiety, hurt, physical pain could be any number of things. And so, yeah, the better. So I could totally agree that the better that we can get at understanding what we're going through, the better that we're able to then let our partners know where we're at so that they don't have to walk on eggshells and make assumptions or, tap dance around their partner because they have no idea kind of really who they're upset, what this anger is really all about. Is it from their job? Is it because they're grieving something? Yeah. Is it because of me? So, there's so many, there's so much utility towards better understanding and better being able to put, more accurate words as to what we're going through.
Yes, anger
Yeah.
can be kind of
Mm,
this funnel
mm,
emotion for men. And I think
mhm.
that by default leaves women to kind of be the ones that are doing a lot of emotional labor, of being the ones that are kind of
Yeah.
championing,
Well,
hey, I want to connect with you and I can't do it the way that when you're just distancing from me or just getting angry and we're not understanding this in a more complex and mindful way. So that's, I think, one of the biggest tips that I have for men is to just kind of lean into the feelings. I know you guys get all this messaging about, not to distancing and wanting to be needing to be tough. And I think there
mhm,
is a place for that, right? I think there is a balance that sometimes we don't want to get overly, obsessed with emotions. We want to take them for what they are, which is, little packets of information to inform what our needs are or what maybe some beliefs that we're holding, but not get stuck there so we're drowning in, right? So it's like this
yeah.
balance between having a healthy relationship with emotions.
How do you make that feel okay to a man when we live in a culture that's full of toxic masculinity? Like, you have to be a man, you can't talk about your feelings because that's messaging that's been going around for such a long time. And to break that, I think is really what a big challenge is for most people.
I mean, that's a great question. I don't know that I fully have it figured out yet. I think you can extend the invitation and this idea of, a lot of other things that are, it's almost like I've kind of had to play the game of what men are told masculinity is, like leadership, or you're not going to be told by society who you need to be as like a port of entry, right? But I don't even know that's the right answer. Like, I'm still kind of figuring it out because it's almost, I don't know, as a woman, sometimes I think like maybe only men can really help men navigate that. I don't
Mhm,
actually know totally how I feel about that. Like, I think we need more research as, as psychologists, because,
mhm,
there is some people that specialize in men's mental health, but not a ton.
mm,
And I read this book, I think it's called Boys and Men. I wish I had, prepped myself for it, but he was talking about it's actually not a great time to be speaking up for men's mental health because there is so much pushback and blowback, from feminism right now of feeling that we've been making excuses for men for too long and who cares about how men feel. So it's a really sensitive and complex landscape that I don't even totally know how to navigate. And I think it's
oh,
different with every man, right? Some men are
mhm,
automatically, depending on the childhood that they had and the relationship modeling that they had, they're already relational. But then there are some men that I really, sadly, it saddens me to say that I've had some clients that genuinely felt unreachable. And it was so hard because I could see them suffering, I could see their partner suffering, but I don't know if the trauma was too great. I don't know quite what it was, but
mhm.
I just didn't ever feel like I could reach them emotionally, and it made me sad. So I don't it's a very good question, a complex one, and one that I still think about almost daily, to be honest, of like really how do you balance gender role socialization and how that impacts relationships and couples
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah. So you were talking about Boys and Men by Richard Reeves. I
Thank
went
you.
to reach I went to reach for my copy because I actually own it. I've met Richard Reeves once at a men's mental health event here in Seattle. So, and I got the book from him. So that was pretty cool that you know about that. You said something that, hold on, I'm gonna try to remember exactly what you said because there was something that made me think of. Oh, so part time, I am a tour guide down at Pike Place Market, and I've gotten to know that community. And me being, versed in mental health, I find that men who normally wouldn't open up tend to open up to me.
Mm.
And I think you're right about men, especially like manly men. I think they need someone else who they view as a man in order to help them open up. I think that is something that was really key. And I think that's so interesting that most won't open up or be vulnerable with a woman.
And I'm not going to paint it as like most won't, but I think some will. And I think some men need to be initiated by other men. It's like we're carrying this collective father wound. And we just need more male
Yeah. Well,
therapists, more male,
mhm,
so I don't want to say, I don't want to say I've never done it as a woman, but I just want to say we do need more male input, like more involved. I learned so much about men when I was that year I was posting on social media about how things were impacting them and how they were annoyed at the word vulnerability and they were annoyed that they were being told to be more vulnerable and that had been such a bad experience for them. So I
yeah.
just, I need more information from the men out there.
Yeah.
This is an open
Yeah.
invitation to start, talking about your experiences more.
Okay,
Well, like
guys,
you
open
said,
up.
we get so much different messaging. And, the majority of my practice is men, either young adults to, really high achieving men. And the messages, like you said, these father wounds, this, en masse kind of cultural father wound um, that is so different for so many people or lack of father wound, so some of the narratives around how we're supposed to show up, what we're supposed to do with our emotions is so different. Whether that's the father that told you, when you broke your arm to suck it up and it didn't hurt, and maybe didn't even take you, to the hospital, and so you just learn, to bottle up and compartmentalize. And then sometimes, we got vulnerable. We shared something that was, very vulnerable to us, only for it to be weaponized later. And so, a lot of men, I think, just due to, whatever their trauma or experiences have been. And then, I thought over the last 10 years, there's had been a big push for, right, vulnerability for men to open up more to, emotional intelligence. And, what I saw was, like, I think a lot of men did too much of that in a sense. They dumped, every sort of feeling that they had onto their partners and everyone around them. And, only to then kind of burden, I think, people a lot of times, or at least that was sort of the experience they had. And so then they kind of bounce back, to closing up all over again. But like you said, and I think each man is at a different place, there is a balance to whether you're, sort of leading in a relationship or in a family, for those around you to understand what's going on in your world. To better kind of shepherd maybe the people around you so they don't have to do as much of the heavy lifting. And then it's just far more of a partnership.
Mhm. When you were talking, I was thinking of more of this like developmental model that we do want, the women and people in men's lives do want to know about their emotional experiences, but we want it to come from this like processed place, right?
Ooh,
Just like you
uh-huh.
would
Yes,
your wife
yes.
to come and just hit
Mhm.
you. The bullet points of, hey, this didn't feel good to me. Here's what I'd like to happen instead. This is what kind of made me feel ashamed. We want I think the process version. We don't want raw emotions. We want
Yeah,
processed
yeah.
emotions. I think that's something that I was thinking about as you were talking there. Is kind of this idea of like our inner adult is taking
Yeah.
care of our inner kiddo when we're triggered.
Mhm.
And we can kind of think of that when we have these really raw emotions, that comes from maybe a younger place. When we have developmental trauma, we can kind of get frozen there. Right. And so if we can notice these really big feelings and these really big reactions and then begin to make some meaning of them, process them, at that point, I think that's a good sharing point with a partner. To
Mm.
that, it can be weaponized, it can be flooding, it can be too vulnerable, right? Like
Yeah.
some people aren't safe to share with. Not all women are emotionally intelligent either, right? So like to have the discernment of who to share, when to share, if this person has the capacity to tolerate your vulnerable states and actually really show up well for you. I think those are all skills that men would do so well to learn.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. The processed version of what we're going through. On that same Gottlieb Huberman podcast, she was bringing up, when we're going to share emotions, we should ask ourselves, is it kind? Is it true? And is it useful? And I thought those were a great little checklist of, when and that is kind of the process. Why am I sharing this? How is it going to land on the other person? How is this emotion going to affect my partner? You know,
Yes, that's what makes it relational, right? Otherwise it's just kind of like a masturbatory sharing of emotions. Hold there while I
yeah,
share my feelings.
absolutely.
If
Mhm.
you're
Yeah.
thinking about what's my intention of
Yeah.
why am I sharing this, how is it going to impact it? That is what makes it relational.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, any other great suggestions, big things, that have been on the mind when it comes to showing up? I know, Scott, you had kind of mentioned you wanted to sort of explore, talk about communication, or I think there was.
Yeah, I just think there's a huge lack of the ability between men and women to not just communicate feelings, but to um communicate what is like how a situation affects them differently. And I feel like they don't talk about those things sometimes until it's too late. So, what are some of the signs to watch for when you can notice someone's activated to maybe notice that you need to give them a hug or you need to let them know that you're there for them? Because that's something that I think that's not just information I think that's information you have to learn.
So is your question, how do you know when to move towards someone as a partner or what to do when you see someone dysregulated?
Yeah,
What
like how do you communicate that you notice your partner is acting off from what you expect
So I think
in
a
a
lot
healthy
of
way?
yeah, so I think you can just narrate your own experience. Hey, honey, I don't know if this is your stuff or my stuff, but I'm noticing an anxiety building in me right now. I'm noticing that I'm worried how this conversation's going to go. I'm noticing that I feel disconnected from you right now. Right. And you kind of describe the impact of how that other person's impacting you because, like, your feelings aren't up for debate. Right. If you tell someone else, oh, you're upset right now, so easy for them to be like, no, I'm not. Right? So I think if you can kind of err on the side of one, just describing your experience of how the other person or, hey, I'm noticing like you seem upset. Or is there, I think sometimes people work too hard, right? Rather than just asking, hey, how can I show up for you right now? Do you need space? What do you need from me? People get anxious and then they want to do something about it. But more often than not, I think what people just want to receive is not being left alone in their experience, right? Someone holding space and being curious about what's going on with you helps someone not feel so alone. And that can be very regulating versus this idea of, oh, I have to do something about it. I have to hug you or tell you the thing that's going to make you feel better. That rarely works. What people really want is to not be left alone with the feeling and just to have someone demonstrate curiosity about what their partner is going through in any given moment and curiosity about, okay, what do you need? How can I be there for you?
Curiosity over assumption. I love that.
Yeah. It's connecting.
Big time. And that is something that I see in my couples work all the time with probably every couple. And, I'll often have them, have a conflict right in front of me. Usually I don't have to prompt it. It almost always, one's about to arise within the first few sessions. And, I'm listening to what each couple is doing, the different ways they're kind of processing things. And so often, I see assumptions, you know, kind of leapfrogging, where their partner was with their feeling and automatically kind of going to, the worst case scenario instead of, like you said, sort of this honest and kind curiosity of this is what I'm experiencing. Am I right? Or is that what's really going on? I could be wrong. And when you kind of almost have this witness sort of that you're kind of speaking from to describe what's going on inside you, instead of, the person attached to the conflict and, sort of in their fight or flight. The other person is far more apt or willing, to want to engage or want to like nurture. Yeah. Instead of pointing to, instead of that criticism, which then almost always leads us, into the criticism, defensiveness, attack, defend stances that we end up in so often.
Yes, curiosity is the antidote for defensiveness. So
Yeah.
whenever either partner finds themselves being defensive, I always tell my clients to say, okay, immediately just switch to curiosity. Like the moment you notice you're doing that, the cure to defensiveness is curiosity. There was something else that you said, but it left my brain. It was darn. I hope it comes back. Oh, yes, I got it. It did come back. That by asking that question, am I right? Just that one question that you said, that does engage a part of the brain that is also regulating, because it forces them to think about their emotional state rather than just be in that reactive state. So it's also just a tool to help nervous system regulation.
Yeah. And you're giving your partner a chance to really kind of nail it and then really connect, right? Oh, I'm feeling, you're really mad at me about this thing. I might be wrong. And they're like, no, I'm actually really just disappointed that the event didn't turn out the way I was hoping it would.
Yeah. Emotions are inherently illogical, right? Like they don't necessarily care about logic at all. Like they may also be informed by some logic, but they may not. And it's not even, I really don't know if it matters all that much, right? Like feelings are transient. They're kind of like weather. They move through. I think people get so freaked out by feelings. They want to avoid them at all costs, men kind of specifically. And I think that the more men can just kind of learn to be curious, hold space, wonder, not take things personal, that's a really helpful stance for relationships on both sides.
Well, and I heard this somewhere that, social media was the greatest like non-prescription opiate or painkiller. And for so many people in general today, just feeling an uncomfortable emotion is not something we do often. Like we are so distracted. So, listening to a podcast, to a reel, to playing a video game, to, just constantly engaging with all of these things in our lives that take us away from what we're actually feeling in the present moment, or to get us to feel something different. And sitting in an uncomfortable emotion is, truly a superpower, and also, something that just the ramifications of not being able to sit in an uncomfortable emotion, I think causes some of the greatest problems in all of our lives.
What we resist persists, or lessons that are not learned just keep getting louder. That's what I've learned both personally and professionally, is that we can really have the courage to think about, okay, like what is this here to teach me? What's happening? And we can really mindfully kind of face whatever uncomfortable feeling that we're having in that moment. I think there's really a lot of wisdom that can come from that. I hope. That's sort of kind of based my career on. I hope I'm right.
So would you say there's like a top 1 to top 5 like tips for couples communication, or the best ways to strengthen your relationship? What's the most important things?
The
Think
most
a couples
important
counselor, maybe.
I would say, seek support, just like you would go to the doctor for a checkup regularly. I would say find a couples therapist that you really trust, just to make sure that you have basic relationship skills, that you know how to do active listening. Oh, I heard you say this. Did I get that right? That you really be able to reflect back to your partner what you heard them say without activating them further. That you can demonstrate empathy, that you are able to locate the emotion and what people are, the information that they're giving you, and reflect that back to them is also really important. I would say kind of having a shared vision or purpose. Like we started the podcast saying that, relationships are kind of in this renaissance, I think, or they aren't necessarily for making babies and for survival anymore, right? That they can be for growth. And so if you guys come together as a couple, kind of figure out what your agreements are. Are we here to protect each other in public and private and to really give each other like what other people, because we do for each other what no one else would do for us. Stan says this all the time, right? Is that, we are in the foxhole together. We have each other's back. We're always going to conduct ourselves in a way that's in the best interest of the relationship. So really being intentional. I think sometimes people go into relationships just because they're attracted to someone or they love someone.
Yeah.
This just really isn't enough. If you're going to be in a relationship, make sure that you're good at it, because otherwise it's just a really miserable experience for everybody involved. So,
Yeah.
I think that would be my next tip, is try to get really good at being in relationships. It's one of the best things for longevity and overall mental health, is prioritize it. Don't avoid it. Don't ignore it. Don't try to deny. If you're a human and you have a pulse, you probably need connection with, if not, not just one, but like several people in your life, but specifically one important one. And I would say don't minimize that. Be
Would
intentional,
you?
have good communication,
Mm,
increase your emotional intelligence. I think those would be my top tips.
mm. And would you say? I mean, it sounds to me like those. Maybe it's almost even something for me to recenter myself around. Of that's what's important to look for in a partner is somebody who sees a relationship as a vehicle for growth in both of our lives, and somebody who wants to support that and wants to nurture that in us, where they make the relationship and working on the relationship a priority, and that the relationship is going to take some growth. I mean, it's going to take some work, and it doesn't like this idea of a soulmate that we find just this person that matches us like level 10 in Tetris. Is I believe soulmates are truly created, and it's through that. So yeah, some great advice there as far as how to look at relationships and what we should be prioritizing.
Yeah, I would say if we're thinking for men about what to be looking for in a partner, I would say look for someone who's self-reflective, that they can understand why they said a thing, what was going on for them. I think culturally both genders have been kind of, we can be prone to objectifying each other, for providing or
Mhm.
for looks. And that
Mhm.
those things can fade over time, and that the things that really last are the things that we kind of intentionally cultivate. And so looking for someone with emotional intelligence is quite wise, in my opinion, on both
Mhm.
sides.
Mhm. It's actively wanting to continue that growth, I think, in those departments.
Yeah, that I do
Yeah.
think it's very helpful to have a growth mindset in relationships. If you're in this victim mentality of these things are happening to you and not for you, for your growth, for your evolution
Mhm.
as a soul, as a human being, however you want to conceptualize it, it can be really easy to stay stuck and powerless. But if you're like, okay, these things are just here, they're lessons for my evolution.
Yeah.
How do I want to show up for them, rather than feeling, oh, this person is, done this to me and they're not showing up for me, or they're
Yeah.
criticizing me all the time, or they're not doing what they said they were going to do. This victim mentality that is so easy to fall in, because
Yeah.
life hurts, things hurt. So, but I do think social media often does encourage this victim mentality, but that keeps people actually quite ill and stuck, right? Rather than, I'm not saying bypass pain, like absolutely honor your pain, but don't stay stuck there.
Well, Vanessa, that's all of this has been amazing, and there's a ton of wisdom in all of your words. I'm definitely going to replay this back and try to pull some of the tips there. Is there a place where people can find you? Is there anything else any other knowledge you want to drop, or where people can reach out to you? I can't validate, or what's the right recommend, I guess, for a lack of a better word, Vanessa, enough for anybody looking for an incredibly competent and hardworking couples therapist. But yeah, where can people find you?
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for
Oh,
having me. I thank you
uh,
for the opportunity. I don't know if you can tell or not, but I'm so passionate about relationships
mhm.
and couples work and all that. So just thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak about something I'm so passionate about. Vanessa Morgan Therapy on Instagram. And that's also my website, is how you can reach out to me. And just, just for tips, I would just say that, like, I think that where we are going, I hope that where we're going culturally is a place we are more adept relationally. And so I would say, please don't delay. Reach out to providers and people that you believe in that can help show you the skills that you need to be successful in relationships, because there's no reason to continue suffering in relationships. Like, We have the neuroscience now. We know what we need to be successful in relationships. We just need to get that information to people, and we can help people with a lot of suffering, a lot of unnecessary suffering, and really resource them with a lot of support when they know how to show up for each other in ways that are not only science
Uh,
backed, but also relationship, proven. So that would be
well,
my
I
word of
thank you.
wisdom.
I think you just gave us the title to this podcast. There's no reason to be suffering in relationships any longer. So
Yeah,
thank
I think
you.
that's true.
You know.
Great. Well, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for being with us, Vanessa. I really appreciate your information and your knowledge and, of course, your passion. And we'd love to have you on again sometime.
Great.
That does it for us here at Hey Man, It's Okay. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. Please remember to comment, subscribe, check us out on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, as long as it's around, and check on our website, heymanitsokay.com. And from Ryan and Sky, it's okay to not be okay. Thanks for stopping by, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Peace.